Welcome to this short introduction to the transitional poets in British literature. The latter half of the 18th century in English literature witnessed a slow transition from neoclassicism to romanticism. This short period is called the Age of Transition. The transitional poets include William Blake, Thomas Gray, Robert Burns, James Thomson, William Collins, and so on. The transitional poets basically reacted against neoclassicism and the imposition of order and rules. They returned to the style of Spenser and Milton. What are the chief features of transitional poetry? So, as I mentioned earlier, transitional poems reflect a reaction against the neoclassical rules in the mid-18th century. Transitional poetry dropped conventional poetic form and diction and favored freer forms and bold language. The transitional poets preached a return to nature. In these poems, you find there is an elevation of sincere feeling and emotion over dry intellect. Transitional poetry shared in revolutionary fervor of the late 18th century. So, some of the cardinal characteristics of transitional poetry include rebellion against rules, love for liberty, development of naturalism, return to nature, humanism, search for idealism, revolt against conventional literary techniques, revival of medievalism, Hellenism, use of vivid, sensuous verbal imagery, rhythmic patterns, and fresh treatment of old themes. Now, in this video, we will be looking at the three major transitional poets. So, by the end of the 18th century, poets had almost completely abandoned the neoclassical tradition. So, William Blake, Thomas Gray, and Robert Burns are the early representatives of Romantic poetry. Hence, the transitional poets are also called the precursors of Romanticism because their works paved the way for the Romantic revival in English literature. Sometimes they are also referred to as the early Romantics. William Blake's poetry embodied the Romantic spirit by dealing with themes such as love, pathos, humor, as well as the physical world. He rebelled against socio-political and literary conventions of the 18th century proto-18th century literature. Blake is considered by critics as the prototype of the Romantic poets because he is a worthy predecessor who wrote about the countryside, the rustic life, and about childhood. And so he is also considered as more romantic than the Romantic poets. Blake led the naturalistic school of poetry, which later found its greatest exponent in William Wordsworth. He did away with rationality and restraint, and he has used bold and unconventional symbols. As a lyricist par excellence, Blake is considered a visionary. Blake's lyrics were composed in simple yet beautifully apt language. His poems reveal a simplicity, variety, and spontaneity. Blake has to the highest degree the faculty of unreserved self-expression and high quality which leaves an indelible imprint on the minds of the readers. His first famous collection was published as Poetical Sketches in 1783, in which he imitated the poems of Spenser, Shakespeare, and Milton. This was followed by the two famous anthologies of poetry for which Blake is well known for, the Songs of Innocence in 1789 and the Songs of Experience in 1794. The Songs of Innocence is a collection of short lyrical poems that express the poet's views on humans and human society as seen through the eyes of children. In Songs of Experience, which are often referred to as the companion poems of the Songs of Innocence, the mood of spontaneous joy and love is replaced with a more melancholic tone. The poems of Thomas Gray are considered as romantic fragments. He is a poet who has ventured into unfamiliar areas in poetry. He has also used nature as a background, like the other transitional poets. Now, Thomas Gray is often called by critics as a one poem poet because of the famous poem Elegy Written in a Country Churchyard. Gray is known for this single poem. It is considered one of his finest poems. Gray is also important for bringing back to life the use of the first person singular, a form that was considered barbaric by 18th century neoclassical norms. The last poet we will look at in this short video is Robert Burns. The unique characteristic of Robert Burns is the use of Scottish dialect. It is the use of Scottish dialect that made Robert Burns one of the most popular transitional poets. The use of the dialect has imparted a sense of connection with the common man. Like the other transitional poets, Robert Burns has also departed from elegant and artificial diction of 18th century poetry. The key features of Burns' poems are sincerity and passion. And Burns, like William Blake, was also highly influenced by the French Revolution. With this, we come to an end of this short video on the transitional poets in British literature. I hope you enjoyed listening to this video lecture. Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe.